Good day, and welcome to yet another one of our Rand Swiss weekly wraps. I'm Viv Govender, and as usual, we'll cover three topics this week that affected you and your investments going forward. The first is going to be the decision by OPEC Plus to cut oil supplies in order to basically boost prices. The next is a warning by the IMF that the current economic situation remains fragile. And finally, we're going to do a bit of a deep dive into Eskom. We haven't talked about it in a while, but it's still an issue in South Africa that is very important for your investments, as well as for our relationships, not just in terms of the economy, but globally as well. So let's start off with OPEC. So OPEC came out and cut quite a bit this week. We saw oil prices rally quite strongly on that news. For those that haven't been watching the oil markets, since say about last year, we've seen oil prices steadily kind of trickle down, kind of approaching the levels they were before the crisis in the Ukraine. We saw Brent get down to about $70 a barrel, just a little over that. This is from being about $130 a barrel last year. That's a significant drop. $60 out of $130 is a significant drop. And this is being fueled by a number of different factors. Most importantly is some nervousness about the global economic situation and whether or not we're going to have a recession or not. I think right now there's significant fears that there is going to be a bit of a recession coming through. The factors around, for instance, inflation, as well as some weakness in the economy, plus this stuff that's been happening with the banking crisis, means that people are right now in the putting a higher chance than they did just like a month or so ago for a recession, a global slowdown. In that environment, oil demand will be lower. Now, there's factors that should be working against it. The recovery of China, for instance, I think is a big factor. China's a huge demand of energy. The fact that they're getting back on track should be helping out. The fact that we've been seeing things, for instance, a loss of supply in places like Iran and so on more recently. And of course, the ongoing, Ukraine-Russia situation. However, I think that, without the uncertainty around, like the major uncertainty around the Ukraine-Russia situation, which right now seems to be heading towards a stalemate, or looks very, non-changing, at least from the outsider's point of view. The market pretty much says, we know what's going to be happening going forward. What demand looks like, supply kind of looks like, and prices, should not be this high. So they've been bringing it down over the last little while. This move, did boost up prices, not, gigantically, but it did, provide a bit of a bottom to the oil price and, causing it to move a bit higher. I do think that, what's happening at OPEC Plus is very important going forward, and not just on the oil market. I think some of the moves between China, Russia, and, places like Saudi Arabia and some other oil producers out there, in Iran, for instance, has been, really important. The fact that the Saudis were instrumental in that Iranian, it's called Saudi, the Chinese were instrumental in the Iranian-Saudi, peace accord that was recently agreed to. That shows that the US is kind of losing power in the region that it pretty much dominated for a long time. There's also a belief that the Chinese want to get, a lot of commodities traded in not in the US, basically a dollar denomination. They want to be basically either having a Chinese denomination, a global denomination, something that they made up in the BRICS countries, which is nothing they've been looking forward to. All those factors, I think, are very interesting from a global situation. Next, we're going to talk about a warning from the IMF around global economic growth. I do think that we kind of forgotten some of the issues around there. So the IMF brings back the issue around banks, the issue around what's been happening with global debt, and of course the ongoing situation in Russia and Ukraine. That is something I think that we in South Africa are being affected by, but we're not keeping a clear eye on. So what is their particular argument there? They're saying that growth remains fragile. They're saying that we are still in a very precarious situation, and they are saying that we are seeing emerging markets especially under a lot of pressure. I've spoken about this a number of times in the past. When you look at emerging markets right now, it reminds me a lot of what it looked like in the 1980s, where you had higher interest rates, where you had a period where these emerging markets can be facing a series of crises because of the fact that we are seeing their debt servicing requirements basically increasing because they have high interest rates, and the economies are slowing down because there's a global slowdown on the go. So those factors combined together means that emerging markets right now look kind of like what they looked in the 80s. And remember, the 80s were a lost decade effectively for emerging markets. They needed like a debt jubilee, which is basically a cancellation of a whole bunch of debt coming in the 1990s in order for these markets to get back on track again. And I think this is a very important factor to keep an eye out. Also, the fact that they mentioned that the financial crisis is still not over kind of makes sense. Rising interest rates are breaking things, not just in the big banks or some of the smaller banks in like the US and in Europe as well, but globally, and especially in emerging markets. I mean, these countries basically can't afford to go out or don't have the credibility in the market to go and borrow in their own currency. They have to borrow in hard currencies. When they borrow in hard currencies and we see interest rates increase, we see inflation increases, and those hard currency interest rates are rising, debt servicing requirements go crazy. And that obviously is something we've seen already happen, like for instance Sri Lanka, Ghana, and so on. So that's a problem that I think we keep an eye out. And finally, we're going to do a bit of a deep dive into Eskom. Okay, so a couple big developments this week on Eskom. We had firstly an exemption put in and then removed for Eskom's irregular spending. So the government came out and said Eskom doesn't have to report some of the irregular spending as it should be. Basically, there's some weird spending, but quotes, commas there, corruption. Eskom doesn't have to report that as clearly. The reason is quite simple. If they have to report this, they're probably going to get a qualified audit. A qualified audit means it's hard for them to raise money in the financial markets, and this company needs has a $500 billion rands worth of debt. And to give you an idea, if the interest rate that they borrow at is 10%, that's 50 billion. If it goes from 10 to 11, it's 55 billion, round numbers. 5 billion for every extra percent that they have to basically, borrow at. And a qualified audit would be very negative for that. However, they were forced to recant that because, people know that Eskom is a bit of a cesspool of corruption, if you use those terms. And, right now, it's more important to try and provide transparency, clarity about what's happening there, show some commitment to actually fighting corruption, as opposed to try and cutting a couple of percentage points off the debt servicing requirements, because I think at the moment there's a real issue about the underlying credibility of that organization. That's number one. Like I said, that was removed due to backlash. The second thing is that the state of emergency around Eskom was also removed. Now that was put in place, by the president in the depths of, like a month or so ago, when load shedding was a bit worse than it is right now, though it's quite frankly coming back again. When sixes were normal, we haven't seen six for a while, like a few weeks anyway. But he put a state of emergency there to try and make sure that things were fast tracked to try and get around some red tape. The fear was the fast tracking would be fast tracking to corruption and theft, and the fact that it's been removed should also give us a bit of comfort there. And the final thing on Eskom is that we've seen a number of reports by analysts out there saying that we are closer to a total grid collapse than we have been recently. Why? Well, for those that haven't kept track, this is what's happening. A couple of weeks ago, we had a couple of days, about a day or so, I think, maybe not even a day, of zero load shedding, and then we had one, for the rest of the day. So zero for a bit, and then one for the rest of the day. This comes, like I said, after a couple of months ago. Sorry, we were looking at sixes, 4 and 6 most of the time. To go to 0 to 1, a big change, very, very important. But there's a fear that in order to achieve this reduction, the company Eskom has basically been running a bit closer to the edge than they should have been. Right now, as I speak to you, we're currently level 3 in the day and level 4 basically for the evening till the morning. Okay, the 1 and 0s didn't last very long. Okay, but a week or two. Now we're back to 3 and 4. The question is 3 and 4 with the same kind of level or margin of basically error or margin of safety, let me say, as we had when we were doing like 4 and 6s back a few months ago, or as the new regime at Eskom basically decided, hey, we need power right now. We want to show a good, face to the public. So let us basically go out and, cut load shedding down. But not to do that, what we're really doing is cutting the margin of safety and putting us closer to the possibility of a grid collapse. And so that is something I think that we need to think about as well. We are going to go into winter. This was probably the first week we've had, at least in the Highveld, where we've seen like temperatures drop a little bit. It's been a couple of cold nights and so on. We are still in April. We got basically May, June, July, August. We could count that in as some really cold months. In that period of time, when the temperature really falls, when heaters come out, when we have an uptick in terms of energy consumption, if this philosophy of basically running closer to the edge is going to be holding out, yes, the chance of a grid collapse does increase, and obviously the associated risks that come along with that. Okay, I just want to add one last thing, and I think that I'm going to be doing this every week as well, is a little end note on AI and what's been happening in the field. I think it's important for us to keep track of this. I've heard people talk about what's happening in AI right now as the iPhone moment, or the internet moment. And quite frankly, I think this might be larger. From what I gather right now, what's happening in artificial intelligence is not just, we've had a couple of advances and then we've squeezed out the advances, and that's what GPT-4 is, the latest version of GPT, which is considered to be the best chat program out there at the moment. What we're seeing is that there's been some kind of step change in technology, and we haven't even come close to fully exploiting all the kind of tricks and things that can be allowed with this new technology in order to get better results. Here's the example of what I'm talking about. A paper was released this week called Reflection. What this basically means is that when you ask GPT-4 a question or give it a task, for instance, write a poem where every word in the poem starts with the letter E. Okay. Ordinarily, it'll give you a poem, but there'll be maybe 3-4 words in there that don't start with E. What you do then is you ask, did you fulfill the task correctly, or something similar? It'll go over its output, look again at its prompt, and then reconfigure it. And what they found is that this particular method of just asking it to reflect on the answer it's given out, that's where the word reflection comes from, means that the accuracy of the program goes from about 67-68% to over 80%. Just asking it to reflect on what it's done. Strangely enough, this technique does not work with GPT-3. It only works with GPT-4. Okay, showing that maybe there's more capacity here, maybe for whatever kind of quirk in the architecture, it's now working and doing things like reflection. And reflection, as simple as it sounds, gives you from a 67 to an 80% improvement. So you go from 67% and you go to up to 88% in terms of the accuracy of the output. Okay, that's a huge difference. I mean, 1 in 3 wrong to getting 1 in 5 wrong, effectively. Okay, so that's a huge thing. And why is it important? It's because it's a simple, stupid trick. They didn't increase the amount of data the program had, didn't increase the number of chips and transformers and whatever it was using in the background to train it. All it was doing was just a simple technique. Reflection gives you this gigantic improvement in terms of accuracy. Okay, and there are many more tricks like this. It's only been 2 weeks since the program's come out. Okay, 2.5 weeks, and already there's a little trick like this that can give you that much out. But there's other tricks as well that people are using that are giving smaller degrees of improvement, and that means that even given the current architecture and nothing else happening in the AI space, in the current program, give people a year or two, and you'll find there'll be incredible improvement in accuracy from the program, even as it is, just because people know or learn how to use it better. And that won't be the case. There will not be a pause, because GPT-5 is being trained, and apparently will be fully trained by the end of this year. Who knows how long the safety round is going to be? I think for GPT-4 it was almost a year, but there will be a safety round where they basically go through it and try and figure out what's allowed and good or bad about the program, and try and restrain to a certain extent. But 3 to 4, this reflection thing works. Who knows what new techniques will work between 4 and 5? Okay, so AI, big jump up still happening, and from the Rand Swiss point of view, there's going to be a big announcement from our point of view in terms of AI, in terms of the new technologies out there. Look forward to us, for the next, I think, month or so coming out with something. By the way, we're probably not going to have a couple weeks this month in terms of podcast. The reason being is that it's a holiday month. Quite frankly, almost all the weeks are short weeks, and so we're going to take a bit of a break. But we'll be joining you guys again at the start of May. And by then, I think we will be ready to announce this new AI development that we're talking about. Okay, thanks for joining me again. Cheers, and I look forward to seeing you guys in about a month's time.